Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be covering part 2 of the basic principles of cooking methods. The last episode covered heat and temperature and the timing of flavoring. In this episode we'll be discussing dry heat methods. And those methods include the following: broiling, grilling, baking, roasting, sautéing, pan frying, deep frying, and barbecuing. So for today we're just going to be discussing these methods, and in future episodes we'll be going in depth with the procedures for these cooking methods. But for today we're just going to talk about what they mean, at what point they happen, what kind of heat transfer is involved in that cooking process. So let's get started. Dry heat cooking is when heat is applied directly to the food item, either by exposing the food to heat over flame or surrounding the food with heated air or fat. The first example of this is broiling. Broiling is both a radiant heat method and secondary is a conduction cooking method. Broiling heats food via overhead sources at extremely high temps. In some professional settings, that high temperature is up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 1093 degrees Celsius. Most commonly, you're going to find broilers like that in a steakhouse. Those are much too high of a temperature for home use. I think that if you broil in your oven, the highest temperature that it will get to is about 500 degrees. Either way, broiling is happening. Delicate foods that cannot be placed on the lower metal grate of a broiler are often cooked in vessels which heats the food via indirect heat, such as with fish. Pan broiling is a type of broiling where the food is cooked uncovered on a broiler pan, free of fat and oil in the oven, such as with thinner cuts of steak that have been marinated. So you are probably familiar with the pan that comes in the bottom of most ovens, or used to. I'm not sure if new ovens actually have broiler pans that come with them anymore, but you will have most likely seen a broiling pan that can be used like underneath the broiler in your oven. The next form of dry heat cooking is grilling. Grilling uses conduction as its cooking process. In grilling, the food is cooked on a grate or open grid over a heat source made from either wood, charcoal, gas, or electric. Oftentimes in grilling, specific types of woods are used to impart flavor into the item being grilled, and some of the most popular flavors include applewood, hickory, and maple. When grilling, there is also a type of grilling that is referred to as indirect grilling. And indirect grilling is when you take the item that you are trying to grill, and instead of placing it over the flames directly, you place it along the sides so that the heat and the flames are not directly touching the food item, and that is known as indirect grilling. The third dry heat cooking method is baking. And baking is both a convection and a conduction method of cooking. Baking takes place when the food is surrounded with hot, dry air. Baking usually is a term referred to when talking about breads, pastries, vegetables, and fish. Baking is similar to roasting, which is done to meat and poultries. In the baking process, the surface of the food loses moisture, thereby browning the surface of the food in a chemical reaction referred to as the Maillard effect, and we'll be discussing that terminology a little later. The next process is roasting, and roasting is a method that uses both convection and conduction. In roasting, the cooking is done by being surrounded by hot air moving around it in an oven, or oftentimes on a spit where the food is rotated around the heat source. Smoke roasting, or poeleing, is a combination roasting and braising process, similar to pot roasting, where the food is cooked covered with vegetables and fat, which steams the ingredients in its own juices. In this process, no liquid is added. This process is used for tender cuts of meat and poultry that can be browned before or towards the end that do not require long cooking times. Smoke roasted foods are usually served with the juices that have been turned into a gravy. Doneness is determined in the same way as regular roasting. Another form of roasting is the rotisserie, also known as spit roasting. And this is a roasting method where meat is skewered on a long solid rod used to hold food, known as a spit, while being cooked over a fire, either in a fireplace, over a campfire, in an oven, or in the case of meats used to make gyros, a gyro spit. A spit over a broiler. The next dry method of cooking is sautéing, and sautéing uses conduction as its form of cooking. Sautéing is done when food is cooked quickly with a small amount of fat. The fat aids in the heat transfer. Foods are usually cut into small pieces to promote even cooking. One form of sautéing is stir frying, which is a variation in which a wok is used. Using a wok diffuses the heat efficiently and helps with the tossing and stirring, which is the same process used in sautéing. And next we have pan frying, which uses conduction and convection. Pan frying shares a lot of similarities between sautéing and deep frying. These foods are usually breaded to hold in moisture. One thing to note when pan frying is that if your fat is not up to the proper temperature and you are putting a breaded item in it, it will cause the breading to absorb the fat and you will end up with a very, very unappealing, not crisp, mushy product. So make sure the oil is always up to temperature before you put your breaded food item into that oil. One of the other reasons you want to make sure that the temperature is appropriate and not too high is that once you put your food item into the hot oil, if it's too high, the exterior of your food item will become cooked far faster than the interior, and you'll have an undercooked dish. And now we're on to the next form of dry heat cooking, which is deep frying. I know what you're thinking. Deep frying? That doesn't sound like a dry cooking method, but it is. First of all, deep frying uses both convection and conduction in the cooking process. Fat contains no liquid and therefore is not a moist heat cooking method. Aside from the lack of liquid, deep frying requires a higher temperature than with moist heat because liquid cooks at a much lower temperature than fat. Foods for deep frying are typically battered or breaded and should be uniform in size and shape for consistent cooking. One thing you want to make sure of when you're deep frying is residual flavors in the fat when reusing oils and fats, or using them for more than one type of food. The best way, if you're really into deep fried food, is just buy a deep fryer. Try not to use like a saute pan or anything like that. But if you have to, use a saute pan or a pot on the stove. Make sure that you have a thermometer because it's very hard to deep fry properly without being able to acknowledge and adjust the temperature of the oil. You'll end up with something that cooks way too fast or cooks too slow, and like with pan sautéing, absorbs way too much fat, becomes terrible. A deep heavy pot would be the better choice if you're planning to use a stovetop, but like I said, I don't recommend that. Dedicated deep fryers are the safest and produce the most successful outcomes. There are a couple different types of deep frying. One is the basket method, which uses a basket to hold the food. Do not place the food in a food basket when the basket is already in the oil. That may cause splashback. The best method is to have the basket on the side, put the food items into it, and then move the basket over the deep fryer and submerge it at that point. There's also a double basket method, which helps keep the food items submerged in the hot fat instead of floating on top. This encourages more even cooking. The third method is the swimming method, and this is commonly used for battered foods, not breaded, to prevent the battered food from sticking to the basket. So, 3 types of deep frying. Swimming, where you let it float. Double basket, where the food is put in the basket and another basket is put on top to hold the food down. And then regular basket deep frying, which is probably the most common and is what is mostly used in making French fries. And now we're on to the final one. Yes, the home stretch. Barbecuing. Barbecuing is a dry heat method form of cooking. Barbecuing is cooking by way of surrounding the food item with dry heat, like with burning hardwood or coals. It's also used to cook over a grill or a spit with a seasoned marinade or basting sauce. Unlike grilling, barbecuing is a slow cooking method and includes the use of smoke for flavoring. Barbecuing is a slower cooking process that uses smoke to infuse flavor, and while you can use different kinds of woods in grilling to impart flavor, it's a faster cooking method. So that's the difference between those two. Well, that's it for dry cooking methods. The next episode is going to be moist cooking methods, so come back for that. If you haven't watched some of the previous content, go take a look at that. Thank you for stopping by and watching my video today. Hope it's helpful. Please leave a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Leave a comment. Come see me on Twitter. Give me constructive criticism on how to make this content a little bit more interesting for you. I am always up for suggestions. Thank you for watching today, and as always, have a wonderful day.